lessons learned, next steps. This is the discussion that you are going to take and I have to chair, which I'm happy to do. So I'm not going to give you any summary. This has been done by the two gentlemen that have reflected on what they have heard before. So please, I'd like to open the discussion on sustainable approaches to community involvement at World Heritage Sites. I was, yes please.
Just to comment on Ian's encouragement. Can you hear me, Ian?
I've got this thing about me, and I'm finding it really, it's like being in the cone of silence.
Okay.
I'll move, then I can hear you.
Okay. No, I was just going to say that what you just said, I mean, if I had heard what you just said as a student before I went to Somalia to do archaeology, I would not have listened to you, that's the thing. But having gone to Somalia, and a place where everybody sees as an emergency with all sorts of problems, and archaeology should be the last thing, you know, for them to worry about. And I had a quite difficult few first years trying to convince the government and then the UN NGOs to actually consider cultural resources in archaeology. And I think very much what you said. People believe that as soon as you introduce yourself as an archaeologist, they think either you're taking them away from their reality, so they welcome you as escape. Okay, and finally a Somali who won't show me pictures of starving children or whatever. Somebody who will show me some images of nice sites somewhere in the mountains, and then I end up showing them still the community outline sites, which need wells, medicine, and through those communications, they actually started to realize that the concerns that I have are basically the kind of concerns that they have. So after 5 years, not only with my own effort, but also with the effort of other scholars who also realized the significance of their culture, from giving absolutely no money to culture since 1988, the UN, the EU has in 2011 sent out a call for cultural projects, including archaeology, for €4 million. So it does help knocking on doors. It does help actually going to those tedious meetings about people with suits showing you nice graphs, about beneficiaries and stakeholders. In the end, if you can achieve that, actually there is a common ground. There is the people that you're talking about are the same people. And if we can just show that archaeology is not something that is only for the privileged, in fact, it's part of, I mean, we've seen some of the slides today showing us how things are interconnected in terms of environment, economy, social life, quality of life, and politics. And cultural heritage is the basic of that. And the sooner we, as Ian encourages us, get involved with these organizations, because they are, in the end, at least for me, coming from Somalia, they are the people I have to deal with in terms of working out something with the communities and making archaeology and archaeological knowledge and heritage relevant to people.
Any other questions? Comments?
I have a question about this mediation and translation, and I think that we all agree that this is very important, but that it is still lacking, for instance, in education as well. So my question is to Ian, what do you think is necessary in terms of education? Do we need to train archaeologists who are made more interdisciplinary by experience, or do we have to train interdisciplinary thinking, archaeologists that are thinking in an interdisciplinary way. Do we need to mix up disciplines such as geography, archaeology and anthropology, or do we have to train people in a school of sustainability or something like that? What could be the answer?
All of the above. I mean, we do a benchmarking thing for archaeology in Australia on a regular basis where the discipline through the National Association goes out to universities, employers, students, researchers, private companies, and says, okay, what do you think an archaeologist should come out of the university with? We get a big list of things that they should be, and skills other than what we would normally think of as archaeological skills rank absolutely at the top almost across the board. And of course we look at it as university curriculum managers and go, okay, how are we going to fit, this and this and this into an already packed schedule? Part of it is rethinking the curriculum and going, okay, well, I'm sure we can manage. The other though is to talk to, as I do endlessly, and I'm sure other colleagues around the world do the same, talk to colleagues in other faculties, whether it's law or economics or tourism or the earth sciences, natural sciences, to try and at least get a few lectures in there here and there. So I give lectures to criminologists, and I give lectures to, and other colleagues do the same sort of thing. And I think it is a matter of doing that sort of thing. And one good place to do it, our system is quite different to the European system, but one good place to do it is in your European master's level thing. It gives them a bit of a taste as undergraduates. But at the master's level, if you're doing, say, a master's in heritage management, broadly defined, they get a bit of everything. If you're doing a master's in archaeological heritage management, they get a bit of everything broadly defined as well as that. But it is a hurdle. But I think the more we can make people at least aware that there are other worlds out there, other professional languages, other ways of seeing. I mean, people that, Mark, I was talking to before, I said to him, is Incomost Netherlands mainly architects or mainly archaeologists? Because I'm going to go and talk to them in February. That's really important, because if I roll in there, as I would in Australia, and expect a whole bunch of archaeologists who understood everything I was saying, and it's full of architects, I am going to get nowhere. There's no architects in this country, I would imagine, can even spell archaeology, let alone a few. Well, they get the first 4 letters right, which is familiar to them. But I'm being very rude. But a good example would be a very powerful social scientist in my university, whose father was one of my mentors. He was a sort of god of Australian sociology. We were having a meeting about something, and I made a comment about that I could only have got from having read some sociology. And his son, who is this powerful person, we call it the Western dynasty, because the surname is Western. There's hundreds of them. And Mark said, "Oh, how did you know that?" And I said, "Well, I read sociology under your dad." And he said, "I never learned any archaeology." He was in the same department as me, ostensibly doing the same program. And his dad was a big slap down. He said, "Ian's a real social scientist." But I know, I think it's stop the discussion. I think it's really important that we work very hard, not only inside our faculties to get everybody to at least get a bit of an idea, but reach out as well.
It's Felipe and then Sam.
Yeah, sorry. I'd like to insist on this because, in fact, I was going to propose one answer to your question about why archaeologists are not so much engaged in things that are urgently needed for them. And beside all the other answers that we know, today and yesterday and many other days, we have already faced some of these answers, but there is something that we cannot forget, that is perhaps education and training of our archaeologists. Perhaps this is not the best place to tell about, because I know that this faculty is providing extremely good quality of training to their students, and I know that here in this room there are quite a lot of us that are also trying to train our students in a much more diverse and open way. But still, the most of our archaeologists, this is something that is very clear in Southern Europe, the most of our archaeologists are people who is just freakish about single piece of pottery, talking about my piece is older than yours and nothing else. Well, there is no point for that. Yeah, exactly.
So, please defend us.
No, I'm not going to defend it. I mean, I was trained in archaeology by a well-known professor in this country who had a photographic memory, and he would come out in 1969 and remember a shirt that he had seen in 1939, and they matched together. I mean, but anyway, I think you know what I mean. But I want to get back to your discussion, because there is another emerging way in which we get that kind of training. And that is in sustainability, but also in medicine, is basically problem-based learning, where students are basically told, well, look here, this is a real problem. Now you guys go and solve it. And you bring teams together of a number of different disciplines and make them work at it. And then the faculty is there to help them. One of the ways we did that in Phoenix is that the city at one point had to have statutorily a new development plan for the next 10 years. But they had no money to pay for anybody to do it. So we had our students develop the city plan. And that was an amazing experience. And so I think that is another way in which you can actually get at this issue.
I totally agree, and I could not more agree. And we'll come back to the question that you've raised: where do we want to get our education? I've been head of an agency that was put together from two previous agencies: the built environment and the archaeology. And the first thing the minister said when he decided to do that, he said, "We want one piece of paper coming out of your department." Because it's now only one department. That was not so easy, because both sides knew exactly what they wanted. And in fact, they were not very far from each other, but they were incapable of putting this into words. And how is that possible? Because they both come from a similar type of education, they come from similar types of studies, they have the same the same goal, and they speak the same language in terms of use of words, but the outcome is incompatible. How is that possible? That's a question to all of us. I mean, we're facing this. You know, we talk about community involvement, and we are incapable of speaking to our colleagues. So isn't that a very ambitious goal? Please, the French example.
The Parisians.
Oh.
Now, I have a question for Lex, because we were talking about that yesterday. Lex is directing, just for the others, an art center in Maastricht, or residences center, you would tell us. And you were telling me that you were designing your policy plan for the next years. And this is exactly, strategically speaking, the translation that you were talking about too. But the community and the target is, of course, the stakeholders and people who decide in the country. And you told me that the process in itself is very fruitful for you. Can you tell us in a few sentences? We have 2 hours now.
Okay, that's enough. Well, somehow I think there's a difference between writing a policy plan and being involved on all the different tables that you spoke about. But in the end, it might be the same, that somehow you translate what you are doing, your work, in such a way, in a convincing way, that other people not only know what you are doing, but you know it yourself as well. Because translating yourself also gives a new perspective. I think that's what you are aiming at, on yourself and the way that you are progressing, and how you want to shape, of course, I understand now it's not possible, but how you want to shape your future. And by writing a policy plan, but also by speaking at tables and so on and so forth, somehow you can share the same perspectives. And I think it's very important, and one of the things that we did as Van Eyck Academy, because we were quite a close elite institute, we opened up the doors, we invited as many people as possible, and we shared tables in our space, but also outside with people to convince them of what we are doing and what we want to do. And now we really have to support not only of the city and the province, but also of the government. So in the end, I completely agree with you. It's very, very important to step out of your own fields and embrace as much as possible. And it's also enrich yourself. So this is what you want, is this what you want to hear?
Yeah, that's thank you.
Okay, no, it's, I mean also.
But this is, of course, one of the goals of the project, of this project. Trying to
Yes,
do
I
this
know.
kind of thing.
This is why I'm partaking and being a partner in the process.
Just on this idea of interdisciplinarity, I think there's forces which are coming in which are kind of forcing this issue for cases to be relevant. To give a kind of positive example, one of the institutions I've worked with in the past and still do the Council for British Research in the past. So it's the British Institute, in other words, based in Jordan. So in the last few years they've made a very conscious decision to change from what used to be the British Institute of Archaeology and Ancient History has become Council for British Research, something like that. The last few years they've made a very conscious decision to support political scientists, support people doing geography, support people doing plant sciences, to come into what is traditionally an archaeological institute, because they realise that without this kind of diversification, British Academy is not going to find them in the UK. The Jordanians are going to be like, what are you doing here? Stuff, basically. So they were very consciously added this diversity. And it's fantastic to see people who would never consider doing anything with archaeologists before coming into these places, sitting in a library full of archaeology books, increasingly other subject books, interacting with this stuff. To give one example, the Deep Soil project that we're running there, the postdoc we hired her because she Palestinian Jordanian, worked with lots of communities, lots of social science background, worked with refugees, mainly in the past. She came into the project. No, we've never worked with archaeology before. And we were like, fantastic, because we don't want somebody who's here going, you have to save the archaeology, how are we doing it? We took her to see the Olympic site, and she goes, what is this? Why are you trying to save this? And we're like, spend a year talking to people, we're trying to find out. By now, 6 months later, she gets where we're coming from. We've had enough conversations with her, and she's like, I get you, and I'm translating you, and I get the people on the ground. And now she's bringing all these political things that from refugee side, a whole new raft of networks and things like that into the institute, so that the archaeologists don't become that and vice versa. So yeah, I think it is coming, and it can be encouraged, and it's without it, some of these institutions fade away because we cease to be any relevant tables or anything.
But it also doesn't mean not doing archaeology.
No.
I love doing archaeology. I love being an archaeologist, and it just enables you to plug your stuff into new stuff. I mean, a good example is relationships between the sort of formal data that most of us generate out of lots of sites. It gives us long-term trends on the use of animals, we can pick parts and things like that. Plugging that into studies of species conservation, particularly the decline of endangered species, gives the nature conservationists a whole other dimension of what's the word, science to think about. A good example is in the Solomon Islands near Australia, where the biologists were looking at marine turtle extinction. And they said, we're going to go back to year zero, we're going to go right back in time, 1960, to set our baseline for when turtles started to decline. And the archaeologists go, well, we can actually go to 3000, 1960, and we'll give you this whole other data set. And it completely changed the picture that the nature conservationists were doing. Just utterly changed their whole outlook. It changed the funding models, it changed a whole lot of stuff. And so you're still doing archaeology, you're still doing the regular old stuff that you do, but you plug it into things that other people are interested in, relevant to. It's not hard, it's not brain surgery.
Okay, there's slightly different sort of aspect because it's, I seem to time to wrap it up a little bit because it was a fascinating discussion, this morning and this afternoon and this debate. And we have to remember about the objective of this big E of this thing and what actually we can get out of it. Okay, we can present a number of interesting case studies beautifully, and we can sort of reflect on the differences between different sort of sides, and it's kind of quite interesting. But I think that we can go beyond that, and try to do something that is in accord with what UNESCO tries to do. Because UNESCO over the last couple of years at least is trying to be very proactive. Like the project that I presented, the HEADS project I'm a member of, I don't know, it was yoga, whatever it was. That is going in a very similar direction. Go and try to define, the better way in which this heritage site should be, inscribed, news are being inscribed and be more efficient. So when he was presented, it was really fascinating, how inefficient it is in many respects. So there's a good diagnosis, okay? And actually we can add this dimension to this ongoing debate based upon this case study developed on what Sander and Ian, proposed. So be proactive, do something, as a result of that, a kind of, maybe even a recommendation. And then as I sort of suggested, Nuria Sanz, she'll be very happy to participate in the meetings, okay? Go and invite her, in one of the meetings in the future and come these two views together. And she's the person who is willing to listen to, okay? And he's happy to get integrated with the groups who have something to contribute to that. I think they'll be very profitable, if we come from that angle. Because as far as I know, she doesn't look at this stuff from this sort of social perspective. What she likes to do is try to contextualize this, what you rightly observe, the universal value, which is in the convention, okay, that being inevitably has to be stressed, because otherwise there is no chance that any side is going to be inscribed. It is not proven. And so this is kind of thing. And what Sander proposed, the kind of scenario for the future based upon what we know about it, go at the meta level and try to propose something that will integrate its social values and social issues into this debate, okay? And then include what Ian you proposed, a kind of a translation. It was raised by a number of us, in the debate, how to get it translated. We feel that we communicate something wrong with the communication, okay? And we would feel very discouraged and disappointed in a sense that we try to convey some kind of message and the message is not there, okay? So it's something wrong with us and the way in which we try to sort of convey, and then propose and do actually this communication. So something that actually can get this integrated might be very valuable, And obviously we can go and discuss individual cases, but I think something goes beyond and gets everything integrated into one piece that will be of great value of our work and the project itself, because the project will something to contribute to the debate that goes beyond the project itself.
Yes, design UNESCO for change.
I mean, they're happy to listen to, okay? They even have some initiatives, okay? And I said, there are a lot of problems within UNESCO, as we all know, but if there are people who would like to do something within UNESCO.
So we have to be a bit more realistic. I'm coming from the realistic part of it, probably. Now, UNESCO is not a body that forces anything, sorry to say. They have nothing to do with this but coordinate. This is, the World Heritage Convention is a convention of state parties, and state parties do the business. And how much do they take of the advice of the ICOMOS experts when it comes to sites? Do you want to give us an insight on that?
I think at least some of you will be aware of the kind of increasing politicisation of the World Heritage Committee, and the percentage of World Heritage decisions going against the advice of the advisory bodies, IUC and NEARCH, is just, the graph has gone up like that. They are basically rejecting most of the advice most of the time these days. And it's a bit of a crisis. There's meetings.
I know, they have been writing about it.
Yeah.
Can I just postpone this for 2 minutes because Sunday
I want to say goodbye to all of you. We had a wonderful time over the last couple of days, and I hope to see some of you again at some other occasion. But we need to catch a train back to Paris, where she is meeting somebody tomorrow morning at 8, and so this is the last occasion. So
thank you so much. Right, but if I may just recall what Ian said, there are a number of cases where the state parties, I must say not UNESCO, but the state parties were, during their decision, goes completely against the advice of the experts. The number is raising spectacular.
And so what the advisory bodies are doing is trying to game the system by changing the nature of their recommendations because they're anticipating a particular reaction from the state's party. So the whole system is going stupid because the advisory bodies are going, we'll be harsher than we otherwise would because they'll bring it back to here. Whereas if we go sort of not so harsh advice, they completely reject it. So there are meetings happening now try and resolve it. And part of it's to do with the way the experts, like us in this room, aren't translating properly to the World Heritage Committee States Party. But a lot of it is something else as well.
But I think at least the voice should be heard, because I know that because Lynn has been writing about it extensively, about its sort of growing issues within the UNESCO. But I think the expert voice needs to be heard and make it explicit, even so. It is a part of the debate at least. I think this is the value.
Absolutely. What I didn't want to do is I didn't want to stop you doing it, but there must be a chance, there must be a slight more perspective on reality. So I'm not against setting up crazy things, but what we then need to do is actually to write guidelines. And in these state parties, the evaluation is not done by experts. Expert opinion comes through ICONs, and that goes back to the state parties. Now you have to reflect who are the members in the state parties who read this piece of paper, and there we are back to the translation. So we need to translate what we want to say, or what we as experts, or the experts have to translate in a way how the state, it's probably state officials, then read the papers and then reflect on their language. So it doesn't make any sense if we create a new scenario and no one understands us. We get respect. And it's a pity that's on the left, because I was going to ask you if you all agree with what I said, and the word sustainable should be used in the same way as conservatism. That's what he said. Then I'll rephrase the title of our today's workshop. Our today's workshop would, in the terms of Sander, be called "Working Towards Conservative Approaches to Community Involvement at World Heritage Site." Is that what we are doing here? I think he is right, but are we ready to accept this? And if we say we are ready to accept this, then let's go ahead. If not, I come up with another example for you to understand. It's maybe 15 years ago, there was a big fight in the Federal Republic, this tiny country I come from. After reunification, there was a building plan on cultural heritage sites within the center of Berlin. And one architect had not won the competition to do the planning, and I would say consequently he was against anything that the winner actually proposed. Now, because there was a decision by the parliament to follow that line, by the Bundestag, the highest parliament, to follow that line, it was about the building plan around the center, the political center of Berlin. There was no way to go through a community involvement. So what he did, he went behind the Green Party, and he got the Green Party to get as far in public hearings as to change drastically change all the 16 state laws and invent the model of community involvement on major decisions on cultural heritage. Can you imagine? So there was a big debate going on, and the leader of the Green Party was right to it, and it was a very harsh situation for cultural heritage management within our entire country. And then there was a very interesting debate, political debate, run by a journalist who had an architectural education. And the discussion was very much in favor of the Green Party. Everyone agreed that not experts should take a decision. They should be heard, but decisions should never be taken by officials or by experts. They should be done in a democratic way by voting. So the architect almost got through. And then this journalist with an architectural background raised the question to the leader of the Green Party. Is this democratic principle, as I understand, the principle you want to adopt to the entire society? And she said, yes, of course, this is one of our basic. So he said, yes. And I think next week we're going to start with the endangered species. And we're going to have a vote by everyone about beautiful or not so beautiful endangered species and whether we want to protect them or not. Would you agree that we invent this? And she said, Well, this is an interesting question, but maybe this case is different. And I think we should discuss towards conservative approaches to community involvement in the World Heritage Site on the background of this green position. I think we have to be realistic and honest to ourselves. Are we using sustainable in a way that politicians use sustainable, but in fact we mean conservative? Is that true?
Fritz, you know, this morning I raised the question what you have, how you have to define sustainability in the line of archaeology. And now I want to ask you, how do you define conservatism in this way? Then we can speak about it.
This is not fair.
I really mean it.
Yeah.
Because it's the opposite of being progressive or whatever. So what do you mean with that? And then somehow we can discuss.
Yeah. I think this is a very good point. Progressive or sustainable? What do you mean? We are back to the language, aren't we?
Yes.
We are using keywords, and maybe we don't understand the keywords, or maybe we are misusing the keywords. We mean something completely different, but we're using it because we have a purpose. We have a goal which we will not find if we go on a straight way. I don't know, but maybe this is politics.
But there's also the unintended consequence of using particular words, and which, as someone who's working with the indigenous rights for a very long time, is very prominent there. Because while in places like Australia, or say the States or Canada, or places like that, where there is a historically marginalised community, it means a particular thing. I think in South Africa we had the white Dutch, what are they called, borders, claiming indigenous identity. We've got people in England, Druids and all sorts of things, claiming those sorts of identities. And similar sorts of things happening in Australia amongst communities to whom that word originally was never intended to apply. And we were saying, well, why can't we apply? We tick all those boxes in our minds, why can't we? And so using terms, that's an extreme example, but using terms like sustainability, more conservatism, conservation, preservation, those sorts of words can actually lead us down paths in this current political environment that we have to be really, really careful about. Because you do run into situations like the Green case, where you think you're going in the right way, and then all of a sudden you come up against a case where you are going to get screwed, which is not what you wanted to do when you set out.
Well, just again on this point, just understand, or put a different spin on it. From what the discussion we're trying to raise here is to understand it's making a decision about what it is we have that perception we're sustaining and going somewhere, are we, and how we're, the attitude we're coming in when we're trying to sustain something that might exist before, or we're kind of designed to change. Well, in a way, it's, in many cases, raised by Friedrich earlier, as soon as an archaeological team has arrived somewhere, or you start digging a site, you've changed the game, because you can suddenly appear there and all the local think, great, we've got tourism now. We have a movie kind of thing. And in a way, what that kind of, going back to the times, and kind of approaches sustainability, in a way, from what I understand in the discussion, it's once that new reality has been created, that new idea has been raised, be it it's going to be a World Heritage Site, a new archaeological site might be tourism, or we're going to get jobs from the site, or our identity's changed, whatever this, you've opened something up, and there's a new reality, local reality, to a larger, greater extent. It's making whatever that new reality that you've just created as an outsider, to whatever extent an outsider, making sure that situation is sustainable in a way that it's not, it doesn't do damage, it does the least amount of damage, hopefully some positive benefits to some people, but that changes already. You're not sustaining what existed before, you're sustaining some sort of new reality that's just been created by the act of digging, or nominating, or managing, or creating knowledge, or whatever you've just done. Okay, that seems to me, once you cross that boundary, you're managing that new reality.
Which goes to your point about the future.
I would like to come out, you reflect the British situation, or the English situation. Is it 30 years ago when English heritage was created?
Yeah. It's just
English
become
heritage
creative.
coming out of a small department within the Ministry of Media, Culture and Sports. Sports, yeah?
Yeah. It's also-
Taken out, it was blown up. All of us use English heritage standards, guidelines, books. We're looking at it and we think, wow, this is something really good. Since I'm following it actively, they have a 10% cut every year since 15 years. Now, if you take 10% off, you come from an economic part. There is a zero at the end. Sometimes it slows down, but the aim is zero. Now, the prediction is from people who went through that whole process is within 10 years, there's no historic England anymore. It will be a small department in culture, media and sports, where they all came from. I find that interesting because all of us from outside UK would probably agree that what English heritage has done for heritage management, at least within Europe, is something absolutely remarkable and to look up to. There's a lot of, relation that is going on. And from outside, it is completely not understandable. Now, I'd like to put the phrase sustainable in this context. What do you think is sustainable and is at the end of the day, economically speaking, if you have reached a goal that English heritage obviously has reached, making heritage important for the people and making it so sustainable that it is self-sustainable that at the end we don't need English heritage. Is that right?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, as part of that decline in budgeting, you have to put in the influence of the Heritage Lottery Fund, of the lottery money that came in. The government obviously sees that as replacing what it has to provide, if somebody else has got all that money coming in to do those works, it doesn't have to do some of that stuff. And the change is just, within the historic England is coming in. The idea of English heritage now is it's supposed to be self-sustainable. It's going back to be economically self-sustainable, and the government will cover the the public value bit, the public good bit, whatever you want to call it, that comes under the government. You can get rid of the stuff that's markedly self-sustainable. It is not, and all of the stuff that's based on is just figures that come out of the air. It's no way is it going to work to self-sustaining economic benefit. If people will realise that in a few years' time, this idea that the government funding is going to disappear at some point, I don't see that happening because the numbers will never ever work. But it's that viewpoint from the government that's great. So okay, that's self-sustainable, that's managing. That could be a separate thing, and the public value bit will just do it in their self-sustainable bit. It's from their point of view.
I want to. What is their point? This government is elected by the English people. So sorry, it is not their point. It's your point, and it has to be reflected on that.
But that's the thing. The public haven't in any way put an opinion into that. The public haven't voted on that. The public barely know it's happening.
Well,
yes, the same thing goes with development led of preventive archaeology, even in France. If we go the way we are going to be clever and clever into discussing the concept and being a little bit more accurate in what we want in community involvement and all, we're going to clearly to go for a process of less and less and less. And we have a danger there. The danger is not being sustainable ourselves in our own system. So we have to find some pragmatic limits on this concept. This is the thing. And clearly, the political decision destroying English heritage or tomorrow in Iraq, I don't know. This is not taking 10 and 10 and 10. It's taking 50% in terms of social position of this institution in 1 year. But they are doing this, not only money, but also the place they have in the whole system, in the whole process. And I think it's a pity. And this is a political stupid decision.
Yes, I think you are pretty right about remembering that we should think what actually we mean using some words. And also in that sense, it's also very interesting to remember that language is political. So we must be aware about that. But in order to go further in this discussion about the meaning of the words we are using, I like to remember that Sanders was not talking only about sustainability. He put sustainability in close connection with change and with value. And as a matter of fact, I was wishing to ask Sanders something that, well, at the end there was no room to answer that question, but still, I will ask to all of you, because I think it's an important reflection that perhaps any of you, perhaps Paul, for instance, could answer this. My question to Sanders was that, to my view, to what I know about, what he was saying about value is extremely compatible, extremely close to the new definition of value that radical economists, or let me say critical economists, are today developing, trying to discover how in digital environments, in electronic environments, in the new sort of society, in knowledge society, value is getting a new sort of state that is going further on than just economic value. What's happening at the end is that the big corporations and the big companies still convert this new definition of value in economic value for themselves. But radical communities, hackers communities, and so on are creating a new definition of value that, to my view, to my knowledge, I think is quite close to what Sanders was reflecting about value, and is also quite close even to the nice example he put us about value in this Papua New Guinea trader. This is my open question to all of you, because at the end I even asked to Sanders.
Yes, I think this is a very important point, and I would like to add to your question in the second part. You're speaking about the definition of the content value from a sociological point of view. And I would also like to add that if you do that, which I think we have to do, and we have to follow or continue or contribute to that change, we should also be honest enough to reflect about the economic side. I understand that there is a little bit of resistance from some of us to completely include. Yeah, but you know, at the end of the day, it's always the question: someone has to pay this bill. And you know, it's like being in a bar. We can be very happy, but there comes this last moment, and someone has to pay the bill. We can share it, or we can run away. It has to be paid. So we have to reflect on that side too. And how honest are we within, and I mean all of us, how honest are we about our relation to tourism? How honest are we? Why are we so skeptical? And I'm looking at the European side of that. Why do we have a problem with admitting that the heritage concept, which is a marketing concept, is difficult for us in terms of getting and admitting that we are getting close together with that part of society that creates the income, the tourism sector. So I would like to combine the two questions.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think just because there's a dissonance with the scientific value, which we all adore in a certain level, but I think that many of them, especially the older people working in institutions like the faculty, for example, they still value like the scientific value more than the economic asset. I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting aspect. I don't know whether you remember the World Cup final 1990. I'm not talking about the football part of it. I'm talking about the concert of the three tenors in the Caracalla camps in Rome. Before 1990, I would say the popularity of even someone like Luciano Pavarotti was to the connoisseurs of tenors. After 1990, the rise of sales of Italian tenors, and Verdi, Puccini, and you name them, went up by 1,000%. And everyone was allowed to listen to it, and everyone enjoyed Pavarotti. All of a sudden, he was there before. And it was because of football. Can you imagine? Now, the conservative part of the group, who enjoyed to pay $300, $500 to enjoy Pavarotti in the net, might have been shocked at the end, because now everybody could enjoy. Is that good or is that bad? There's one fact, it is real. It isn't. Isn't this our position as heritage managers? And I would like to come to my definition. Heritage managers as managers of change.
May I ask you a question? When you say now managers of change, in referring to what someone presented earlier as well, is that a change where this post-historic possibility, this post-historic position is available to, for lack of a better term, rewrite, re-author, re-envision both value and meaning to the study of archaeology and the meaning that's assigned to archaeological findings?
I think it should be open and accessible and for wide participation. And that means if there is an intelligent and persuasive way of changing the values, it should be possible. And
yesterday at Friedrich, actually probably not in relationship to the subject, we had a screening by an artist called Alan Set, and it's a screening about paleontology. The United States prides itself in being the location for the big beasts. They claim the T-Rex, the number one dinosaur everybody wants to see. The way that the T-Rex has evolved in contemporary society, coincidentally, paleontology is a very interesting science because it basically was born, or it became very visible around the time of really like a modernist revolution. So it coincides with this idea of a direction to be taken, meanwhile understanding the historic past. But the claim of America, from the national government to bone hunters, as they call themselves, to Navajo Indians, who live on a very limited reservation because they've been assigned there by a national government, who actually have a claim to these bones that are being found, that are being dug up. There's like a tug and pull on all sides. And the value that we're discussing here is a symbolic capital. And I think that symbolic capital ultimately also finds its way to some of the other discussions that we are having now. I wanted to mention that as an example, because I think there it becomes clear that it's not only community engagement, it's not only an economic value, but it also is, for lack of a better term, cultural and therefore also political problem.
it is the same society, we're speaking about the same society that I was confronted with waiting on the airport for my flight back to Europe after doing surveys on a potential World Heritage Site in Ohio. And I met this couple that came back from a 2 weeks tour. They were 70, 75. She had been a teacher at school. And they came back from a tour on World Heritage Sites in Europe. And they asked me, and they enjoyed it very much, found it very, told me all about it. And then they said, what were you doing when you were in the States? And I said, well, I was doing a survey on a site in Ohio that might, within the next 5 years, be on the World Heritage list. And she looked at her husband and said, I didn't know we had something like this in this country. Same society. What is the value? The value is tea and coffee.
I think so. Thank you very much, Peter.